Let there be carnage, apparently. Oh boy. So everybody, I just saw Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage. I saw it very drunk, and I am continuing that trend with as we continue with this review. Though I probably should not drink much more of that because I'll be definitely feeling it. But regardless, my thoughts on Venom 2, Venom, Let There Be Carnage. My admittedly drunken thoughts, but right up front, this is not a good movie. It is not a good movie at all. But I have two minds of it in terms of one element of me that really enjoys this as a so bad it's good movie, and I'll talk about what aspects I'm coming at that from. And even then, I still have some caveats. But also, there's an element of me that is kind of frustrated with this movie for some other reasons, from like an intellectual distance point of view. Not that you necessarily need to put on your intellectual cap for Venom, Let There Be Carnage, let me be fair. But there's some stuff that I kind of want to talk about in terms of what this movie is overtly trying to do in terms of its coding of the relationship between Eddie and Venom, which is the most interesting part of the movie, let's be fair, but I also want to kind of talk and deconstruct that a little bit with this review. And then also, I will stay spoiler-free for the most part of this review, except for I will have to talk about the after-credit scene, because the after-credit scene is... there's a lot to talk about there. In fact, there's probably more to talk about with the after-credit scene than with the entirety of the movie. So I will get to that part. We will talk about it. But let's stay spoiler-free up front and sort of stay with my my general thoughts on this movie. First and foremost, like I said, this is a movie that is definitely on the... I need another sip of beer for this. Oh boy. This is definitely on that so bad it's good spectrum. For me, there are some people that you will not be able to go into this movie and you'll just come out of it and like, that was trash, absolute trash. In fact, I saw this in a theater, and literally, I was the only one laughing the entire movie. Like, the entire movie, this movie is so over-the-top, cringy, very, very cringy. Like, some of the lines are just like, groan-worthy, like Woody Harrelson saying, there was so much carnage, all the time, like, so many times. There's so many, like, bad setups and bad jokes. Like, there's one point where, like, Eddie Brock, Tom Hardy, is hanging off the edge of a building, and he's calling someone on the phone, and he's like, oh, I'm just hanging around. It's like, oh, you did the joke that we all knew was coming. So... all of that cringeworthy, you expect it kind of jokes are here. Again, kind of like the first movie, it feels very much like a 90s superhero movie where studios did not know how to make a superhero movie. They didn't know what it was, but it feels really weird in the sort of period that we are now where we have a renaissance of many amazing superhero movies. So the fact that they just haven't figured that out is weird to me. But in a weird way, like the first movie, it still kind of feels... it feels like nostalgic and strangely fresh in a weird way. It's like, it's a bad movie, but I'm enjoying it for what it is. And that's very much the vibe that you have to go into this movie with, because I was enjoying myself and laughing my butt off the entire time, but no one else in the theater was. It was almost dead silent. And there was a decent crowd there, all vaccinated. You had to show you vaccination cards and all that stuff. Anyone's worried about that. But it was dead silent. I even heard people coming out of the movie and they were just like taking it serious. Like, yeah, it was fine. And I thought it was very dark. And I'm like, this movie is a comedy, and in some ways it's self-aware of that, and I think the biggest way it's self-aware in that is the Eddie and Venom relationship, and that is clearly the best part of this movie. The odd couple relationship between these two is funny, weird, strange. I love some of the moments. I love like Venom getting really embroiled in Eddie's life and like really caring about his love life. The fights that they have and like the sort of jokes and vibe that they have going back and forth is actually very, very funny. And I actually kind of enjoyed a lot of that very earnestly, even if it is just kind of trashy and dumb. And then there's some moments where they have like a breakup sort of thing that is also really, I like Venom going to kind of a rave in the middle of San Francisco, and he gets affirmations of love and everything, and everyone sort of accepts him. All that stuff I actually think is really, really great here. Let me get into my little SJW rant here. I know none of you care, but some people will probably pick this up and be annoyed by it, but I know most of you in my audience actually want to hear this point of view. There is a part of me that is frustrated that this movie is so overtly and obviously, it's not even subtle. It is leaning into gay coding of Eddie and Venom, and it's very intentionally doing so. This movie clearly evokes that they are a couple and like are together. And yes, Eddie has a love interest in the girl that Venom's trying to help him with Abby. but the movie is very clearly trying to make them like they are in kind of like they even have a breakup scene. They get back together. They have an apology scene. There's even like a jokey kiss moment where they almost kiss, like Venom and Eddie kiss. And mild spoiler. This is just a mild thing that happens at the end of the movie. Like Venom literally tells Eddie that he loves him, and like not in a romantic sense, but he says that. And so this movie is very much like using gay coding, which to a degree is part of what was funny about the first film, and that was what so many people were like making jokes about like with trailers and stuff after the movie, that they were in love with each other. And this movie is definitely sort of taking that joke and running with it. And again, that is the most interesting part of the movie, but there's a part of me that's frustrated where it's like, you're so willing to use gay coding in this movie, and yet we still don't have a blockbuster LGBTQ superhero. And that's not necessarily specifically Sony's fault, the studio that made this movie. They haven't helped that in any shape or form. But certainly I look more at like Marvel or Warner Brothers, who have not and had ample opportunity. You could maybe argue Harley Quinn in Birds of Prey, but they don't really make it explicitly overt with her character within those movies. And so it is... it's just kind of frustrating me. It's like, it's not necessarily this movie's fault. It's not a problem, but it's with this movie in and of itself. It's like, this is the closest thing we have to a titular gay superhero. It's the closest thing we got is the monster coding love story between Venom and Tom Hardy. And again, monster stories within us are definitely a time-honored gay trope, but that goes back to gay coding. And it's like, this movie is so willing to overtly, that's the thing that gets me. It's like, I can handle subtle gay coding. If it's not queer baiting, I can handle that. Like, we can talk about queer baiting, the thing with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, for example. But the fact that this is so willing to obviously traffic in gay coding, it's not even hiding the fact that this is gay coding, and it wants you to know it, and it wants you to kind of laugh along with it, which is fine. But the fact that you're just willing to take these elements of gay coding and like the history of gay coding and sort of parade it around to be laughed at when we don't even have a gay superhero, it's a longer thing for me to dive into when I'm not a couple beers in. There's a larger conversation about it, but it just frustrates me. That's where I'll leave it off there. I'll leave that off there because let's talk about the rest of the movie. So that's a longer topic that I want to discuss at some point. Maybe it's a whole video worth discussing. But let's get into the rest of this. The rest of this movie does not hold up as well as the Venom and Eddie relationship. That is clearly the best part if you take out my sort of like other issues with it in sort of broader context. That is the best part of the movie, and it made me laugh, and I earnestly enjoyed it. Everything else is dull and boring. To be quite frank with you. Woody Harrelson's Carnage is utterly forgettable. Woody Harrelson isn't really even trying. He brings no gravitas or persona to it. There's not even like... with Curtis, you could do something crazy and over the top with him and like really just ham it up. Like, I wish he had hammed it up, but he plays it kind of straight. And I was just kind of bored whenever he was on screen. Carnage doesn't come across as anything specifically interesting. He just comes across as a red version of the same symbiote that we had last movie. And so it's just sort of like... okay. Is that what these Venom movies are going to be? Like the next Venom movie is like, oh, there's a green Venom now? Ooh. Which is sad because I was at least willing to give the fact that the first movie's villain was boring, because it's like Carnage at least brings something a little bit else to like the symbiote nature here, but this movie just really doesn't. He's just a red symbiote, and that's really it. Even further, I really felt during the Carnage sequences that this movie was constrained to a PG-13 rating rather than R rating. Like, there were just moments during the action sequences and bits with Carnage where I just really wanted Carnage to just go all out and go crazy, and he just doesn't. And so he just feels like a watered-down version of what Carnage was always supposed to be, which was Venom Unleashed, just Venom going crazy and just murdering folks with abandon. And even in the sequences where Carnage is causing carnage, you just feel like the movie is just like, nah, we're not gonna bite that guy's head off. Nah, we're not gonna be all bloody and gory. And not that I'm not someone who's like, I need blood and gore in all of my movies. I don't. But you just really felt the constraints of the PG-13 rating in any of the sequences with Carnage. And I really felt like they could have really gone over the edge and really showed how horrific Carnage was supposed to be and distinguish him from Venom. Because there's this whole arc in this movie about Venom being like constrained by Eddie, but also being like a good person and he's not murdering people. And so just contrasting that with Carnage and showing Carnage actually going crazy would have been a great juxtaposition. But no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to go for the PG-13 rating because we'll think it sells more tickets that way and ultimately makes a more bland, boring character and movie. So that was ultimately also very frustrating with the Carnage character. And I was just so bored by it. Shriek, It's weird the fact that she plays Penny in the James Bond movies, and that's the next movie's coming out next week, which I'm very excited for. No Time to Die, and she's great in those movies, and here she's just, again, boring and dull. There's kind of a side plot that interweaves stuff together. I wish I could say more than it was just I was bored by it. It's exactly the plot you expect it to be, ties together exactly the way you expect it to be, and no actor is really bringing anything special to the part. The only person that brings anything special to this is Tom Hardy and Venom, and they are fun and they are interesting, and I enjoyed watching them in a so bad it's good way. Everything else I was just sort of like, okay, it's here. It's definitely here, and I'm either bored or hate it. Let's be fair. There was nothing I actively hated. I just was bored with most of the other stuff. But everything else, I with Eddie and Venom, I like their dynamic. In a weird way, I like their dynamic despite my issues with it. And the movie, thankfully, only is about 90 minutes, actually even a little bit less, I think. And so you get in and out, and so it doesn't overstay its welcome. It doesn't go over long, and I can give it that. Most superhero movies, even superhero movies that I like, tend to be over long. Like Shang-Chi, I really earnestly enjoyed Shang-Chi. Even I felt that was like 15 minutes too long. So this movie gets in and out, and I appreciate it for that. That is something that I think other superhero movies, even movies that I really, really love, can learn a lot from. Because we're hitting like normally like 2 hours, 2.5 hours with superhero movies nowadays. And look, I love my superhero movies, but sometimes I can feel it drag, and this movie does not drag. I'll give it that. And so, like, at the end of the day, go into this movie drunk and just enjoy yourself and laugh at it. And I think that that's partially what the movie wants you to do. I don't think this movie was trying to be cinema. I don't think the guy who played Gollum is coming in here and being like, that's the director, Andy Serkis, is telling you to go into this movie expecting cinema, like the next best superhero movie. I think it wants you to laugh at it. And if it did that at least in part in certain sequences. And I enjoyed it for it. Let's end this out with one more sip of beer and give a spoiler warning, because I am going to talk about the after credit sequence, because we kind of need to talk about it here. The after credit sequence, full spoilers. We see Venom and Eddie getting teleported into the MCU, and we see the J. Jonah Jameson sequence that we saw at the end of Far From Home, and we see Tom Holland Spider-Man, and of course more gay coding, by the way, with Venom licking the screen saying "that man" or "that guy" or whatever he says, and then a guy coming out of the a bathroom almost naked. Again, it's classic like gay coding stuff that it's leading into. It's like, oh look, Eddie's in a room with a guy and he's looking at a man. It's all that stuff. But regardless, this is interesting to me that Venom is in the MCU. I was kind of anticipating that they would do this, that this is some sort of confirmation that given the multiversal nature of Spider-Man and Spider-Man No Way Home, the next Spider-Man movie coming out, that they're basically, Venom's going to be in that movie in some way, shape, or form. Now, I was surprised because I saw a lot of people speculating that. First off, the first thing that needs to be said is this jump to the MCU apparently occurs right at the moment at the end of Far From Home, because it's the same news clip that we saw at the end of Far From Home. So it could have happened some other time later, like replaying or something like that. But the implication is that this is at that same moment, which is interesting to me, because obviously what we saw in the Spider-Man trailer, that Doctor Strange causing that multiverse collapse, that shouldn't have happened until later on. Like, it didn't happen at that moment. So are people coming over sooner? Like, is there a time element? Which would make sense with Doctor Strange and the Time Stone. Though I don't know if he still has that anymore after Endgame. I kind of forget now that I'm not entirely sure. He might still have it, but I'm not 100% on that. But anyways, would make some semblance of sense. So that has me sort of curious in the time sequence of these things. But I also saw a lot of people speculating. I was listening to a couple podcasts on my way back from the theater, because I walked to the theater. And I heard a couple podcasts speculating like, oh, this means Venom's going to be in the MCU now. I don't think that that's going to be the plan. My read on this is there was so much hullabaloo about Sony almost not even letting the MCU make this movie, this next Spider-Man movie, that my guess, this is just a complete speculation here, is that what's going to happen at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home, because it is No Way Home, is that Spider-Man is going to be taken out of the MCU and shunted off into his own Sony universe. And that Sony universe is going to have Venom and Eddie in it. And now Venom and Eddie may appear in the MCU with the next Spider-Man movie, but by the end of the movie, movie, I expect all of them to be sort of shunted off into their own universe, where Jared Leto's Morbius will also be gallivanting around, apparently. And so that's where we get like the Sinister Stick stuff and Spider-Man stuff, but he'll be out of the MCU and fully in Sony's control. And that's what this end movie is going to be, is sort of like shunting Spider-Man out of that. I saw some people saying the opposite, that now Venom's going to be part of the MCU, which would be interesting. I definitely think the MCU will do a better job with Eddie Brock and Venom than this movie did in terms of like making them actually interesting characters, because that's the other thing too. Eddie is not an interesting character in this movie. He has an interesting dynamic Venom, but he's a terrible reporter, dull romance. I don't care about his life. His reporting skills are non-existent. So that's something else to say. But I trust the MCU to do something good with them in the MCU. The question is whether or not they're going to stick around in the MCU. My bet would be on no. My bet would be that Sony's taking Spider-Man and the Venom universe. They're like saying, all right, you fixed our franchise for us. We're going to bring it and take it and do our own thing and then run it into the ground again, like they did with the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies, my assumption would be. If the Venom movies are any evidence of that, I do not trust them to make a good Like, I can enjoy the Venom movies so bad they're good. I do not think I could enjoy this same sort of level for a Spider-Man movie. I will be out on that. But I can enjoy So Bad You're Good Venom movie. So that's my read on it. I'm kind of curious about Venom in the MCU, because I'm honestly kind of curious to see what Eddie and Venom will be like in an MCU movie, and if they can actually fix the mess that this movie is. Because yeah, I think that's all I can really say. I'm curious and excited about it. It's an after credit sequence that has me excited, but it has me excited in spite of this movie rather than because of it, if that makes any sense. Like, I am more curious to see what the MCU can do with these characters better than I am with actually seeing this movie, seeing these characters like come out of this movie into the MCU. So then that's sort of my thoughts on it. I enjoyed it. It's a get drunk, get high, go with friends, make fun of this movie kind of thing. And I think the movie kind of wants that. And I'm interested in what's going on next with it. But especially in relation to Spider-Man No Way Home. But at the end of the day, I'm also have some reservations on terms of what works in this movie and what it kind of signals to me. It seems a little bit frustrating, I guess would be the best word, in terms of the gay coding of the film. And then the rest of the movie, outside of the stuff that I found interesting and yet frustrating, is whatever. It's there. So that's my thought on Venom. I wanted to say Venom No Way Home. I guess Venom Let There Be Carnage. What did you think about it? Did you like it? Were you frustrated like me? Do you think I'm over worrying about anything else? Do you laugh as much as me? I have to say, the last time I had an experience like this was when I saw Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. That was another movie that I was just like, I'm laughing at this movie. I'm enjoying it, but it is terrible. And no one else was laughing with me. But I sure as hell got some comedy out of that movie. Same thing with this one. So did you get a similar experience like that? I'd love to hear all that down in the comments below. But beyond that, I have a Patreon that you help support me at. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and beyond all that, I hope that you, as always, live long and stay sexy.